So in this episode, we'll be installing the domino connectors, all the mortises for the hardwood banding. Then we'll be doing a dry fit and final glue up. Now the exciting part happens where we get to see things really start to take shape. But before we do that, we have to install the domino connectors, so then we can start doing a dry fit. So for this domino connector setup, we've got the expansion joint, which fits in the mortise like that. And then we've got the capture nut with the plastic capture ring that will fit inside the hole that we drilled prior to this. So what I like to do first is put the set screw in. Just get it started. You don't want it in too far. And then you'll install it in the hole you drilled previously and put the plastic capture ring in. Might have to give it a little tap. Biggest thing here is you want to make sure that it's completely flush. So now I can complete the same process for all the other holes that I drilled. So now I want to talk about the process of dry fit. We're going to have to create a sub-assembly of the internal dividers with the center divider, and then lower that onto the bottom panel, and then we can bring the top panel and attach it all together that way. For these two smaller panels that are going to connect to the center divider, I'm going to use a different type of connector. This is what I like to call a through connector. So when we did these mortises, I plunged all the way through because they're all in line with these two smaller panels. And these actually connect together. We'll go on either side of the panel and then connect to these connectors on the other side. So I'll assemble and install these, just one connector in the center, and then I'll put two solid wood tenons in the top and bottom. So at this point, I want to make sure that I adjust the dip that's in that shaft to line up with where my set screw is going to go. What I like to do is I usually hold the panel up, see where that set screw is, then just take the supplied screwdriver and point it in the same direction. So once I have one side installed, I can come to the back side, tighten this one up to do two things, to get the dish in the correct direction and also suck both those panels together. So now we can go ahead and put in the expansion connectors and the connecting rods to then attach this panel to the center divider. When you're installing the connecting rods and the expansion connectors, you want to make sure that you tighten them all the way down till you can't tighten them anymore. That expands those fingers and locks it into that piece of plywood. Then you can back them off to adjust them to line up with that screw. So now I can install the shelf so that I can put on the next panel. So with the sub-assembly dry fit, everything looks good. Now I can just slide it over a little bit, install my connectors and dominoes into the bottom panel. Then once that's done, I can dry fit the top. So I was able to get the sub-assembly lowered onto the bottom panel. It took a little bit of time, but I got it. Next step is to put the connectors into the top panel and dry fit that onto the top. So with the dry fit complete, everything went together nicely. The next step is going to be to start working on the face frame material. I need to do the vertical pieces before I do the horizontal pieces, because I'm going to have to trim these vertical pieces flush, because if you remember, we made them just a little bit wider than our 3/4 inch plywood. So first I'll break everything down for glue up, but that also gives me access to the individual pieces so I can get the edge banding put on them. So now that I've broken down the cabinet for glue up, I've gone ahead and wheeled in the Capex and got that all set up, I can pull some measurements off these center panels to cut down that maple that we ripped down earlier for the face frame material. So the pieces we're going to be cutting first are these vertical pieces. I've got 10 in total, 8 of them are going to be exactly the same length. Once I pull one measurement, I can go over the Capex, set my flag stops, and cut them all the exact same length. First thing I need to do is get a good clean cut on the end that'll reference off my flag stop, then I can cut the other 8 pieces. After verifying that my measurement was good, I can continue cutting. So with those all cut, I can now cut the short horizontal pieces and the shorter vertical pieces. So now I'll set the flag stop to just a hair over 19 1/4. Even though I'm only cutting 2 of these, I want to double check to make sure that this measurement's exactly right. So now I'll cut 2 at 17 1/2. So out of this stock, the last 4 pieces I need to cut are the 2 long pieces for the base and then 2 long pieces for the upper. So I'll cut these to 63 7/8. So I'll set this to 46 3/8. With all the narrow pieces cut, I can cut these 4 wider pieces, 4 in total, for the shelf and the storage area. The next 4 pieces I'd have to cut are shorter than what the Capex extensions can accommodate. So I already cleaned up one end of the piece of material and I measured my first piece. Then I've got a couple scrap blocks of wood. Once I've lined up my mark with the lasers on the Capex, I'll just put one block up against the bottom piece, and then I'll have another block on top of it. Now I've created a stop as well as a hold down to cut all 4 pieces the exact same length. And make sure the bottom piece of material is the same thickness as the material that you're cutting. I've gone ahead and I've attached about half the banding to the carcass material, but now I'm going to walk through the process of running the dominoes in and also trimming it flush top and bottom. So this end, I'm going to come off of this edge with the flaps, so this will be about 37 millimeters, and that'll be my alignment mortise. The rest, I'm just going to put a small pencil mark every 6 to 8 inches. So the first mortise will be tight, the rest are all going to be loose. I've gone ahead and switched the domino machine over to a 5 millimeter cutter because we're going to switch to 5 by 30 millimeter tenons. I've adjusted my depth to 15 millimeters. I'm going to use the flap for the first one on the tight mortise, and the rest are all going to be loose. To put the mortises in the banding material, I'm just going to clamp it to the carcass itself. And because I know where I'm going to put each and every mortise, I know just to watch out for those marks. Clamp it down. This will be the same process I did on the carcass material. Start out with a tight mortise, and the rest are all going to be loose. Next step in the process is to put the dominoes in the banding and then attach the banding to the carcass. I apply the glue to one side of the domino, put it in the mortise, Do that to all of them, and then I'll apply glue to the face of the banding. With everything glued up, I can go ahead and put it on the carcass material, tack it on with my headless pinner, wipe all the excess glue off, and then we can trim everything flush. I've got the OF1010 router with the edging plate set up on it. I've got a 2-flute straight cutting bit. I've adjusted the depth of the router and also the height of the edging plate so that I'm trimming perfectly flush with my carcass material. I always recommend doing a sample piece first so you don't damage your finished material. So with that piece trimmed flush, I can move on to the next couple pieces. I'll just mark it, mortise it, glue it, trim it, and then move on to the next piece. So this will be the last piece of banding for the main carcass pieces. Then the only thing we have left to do is domino the shelf fronts on the shelf itself. I also need to put a mortise here, 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 and here to attach these shelf fronts to these side banding pieces. I've gone ahead and laid out both of my pieces where my mortises are going to go. I'll be using the 5x30 tenon, so I'll keep my plunge depth at 15 and my fence height at that same 20 millimeter. Since I'll be doing a vertical mortise, I went ahead and put the support foot on. While I have this here, I'll go ahead and glue the dominoes up and attach the front. Now I'll do the same thing on the other end of the shelf. Now I want to add the bottom piece. This is just going to be a stop because this is going to be where I put some miscellaneous parts. I don't want it rolling out or falling out of the bottom. So I'll just domino those together, glue them up, and we'll be ready to go. So this is the other side of this shelf. And I know what my measurement is from the bottom of this face frame material to the center of the mortise. I can just transfer that to these two pieces, make my mortises, and then assemble this as a sub-assembly. So the dry fit for the sub-assembly went great. Everything fits perfect. Now I can put some glue on it, set it aside. The last step before the final assembly is to put these mortises in that I have on the drawing. What these are for is material support. What I can do is cut these as 8mm tenons, and then I'll take a full-size 8mm tenon and I can put that in any one of those mortises. So if I'm supporting a piece of material vertically, it can rest on there and then I can clamp it to the MFT. On the drawing that I did originally, I laid out for 6 different mortises. I cut it down to 4 mortises, so all I did was take the measurement of my panel, divide it by 5 spaces, and that'll evenly space 4 mortises in this panel for me. So I put the 8mm cutter back in the domino. I'm going to set the plunge depth to 20 millimeters because I'm going to use an 8x50 tenon. So that'll leave 30 millimeters hanging out as my material support. Now I can begin the glue up of the entire full assembly. So now I've got everything glued up. Next couple steps are going to be do a little bit of light sanding, get rid of these pencil marks and some of that glue residue that might be left behind. Once those casters are on, then we can put the different drawer systems in for the sustainers. And to wrap everything up, we can put the MFT on top of the cart. If you want to continue with the build, click here or check this out. Don't forget to subscribe. If you want to be notified when we upload new content, click that notification bell.